There are moments when life feels like it's holding its breath. Everything around you keeps moving. The world spins, people rush, prayers rise, but inside, your clock has stopped. You've waited for a door to open, a promise to unfold, a sign that God hasn't forgotten you. Yet all you hear is silence. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months, and that silence begins to echo inside your chest until it almost sounds like absence. You start to wonder if maybe you misunderstood his plan, or worse, if he changed his mind. But here's what few understand. Divine timing doesn't follow the rhythm of your heartbeat or your calendar. God doesn't rush miracles to meet your deadlines. What feels like stillness is often sacred movement beneath the surface. Invisible shifts, unseen alignments, silent preparations. While you stare at what hasn't changed, heaven is rearranging everything that must move before your breakthrough arrives. This silence, this waiting, isn't punishment. It's calibration. It's God tuning your spirit to the right frequency, so when the moment arrives, you recognize it not with surprise, but with peace. Because when the clock seems to stop, it's not time that's frozen. It's you being invited to see differently, to trust deeper, to let go of control. The truth is, God was never late. You just hadn't yet reached the moment when his plan made sense. And when it finally unfolds, you'll realize the waiting wasn't wasted. It was building the very strength you'll need to hold what's coming. The myth of divine delay. We measure time by movement, clocks ticking, calendars turning, deadlines passing, and when nothing changes, we assume something's gone wrong. But what if God's version of time has nothing to do with hours or days, and everything to do with readiness and alignment? What if his so-called delay is not hesitation, but orchestration? From our limited view, delay feels cruel. It stirs anxiety, self-doubt, and that quiet voice whispering, "Maybe God forgot." Yet in truth, heaven doesn't deal in lateness, it deals in precision. Every pause has a purpose, every wait carries weight. The seed doesn't accuse the soil of delay, it simply waits for the right conditions to break open. The same law applies to faith. The silence of God often means the roots of your destiny are still forming beneath the surface. We call it waiting. God calls it weaving. He is threading circumstances, people, and inner growth into a pattern that can only be seen when you step back in time. The delay is not about punishment. It's about placement. You can't arrive too early without collapsing under what wasn't meant to hold you yet. Divine timing is protection disguised as postponement. The truth is, the myth of delay only exists when faith depends on visible proof. But once you trust that unseen alignment is still progress, you stop fighting time and start cooperating with it. Because the clock of heaven has no second hand. It moves only when everything else is ready to move with it. The psychology of waiting. The hardest part of waiting isn't time. It's the war that begins inside the mind. The human brain is designed to crave certainty. When we don't know when something will happen, our nervous system interprets that uncertainty as a threat. Dopamine drops, anxiety rises, and the body enters a subtle state of alertness. It's why waiting feels exhausting, because biologically, it's not rest, it's tension. Andrew Huberman explains that uncertainty activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. Your mind searches for control, trying to fill the silence with explanations. Maybe God isn't listening, maybe I did something wrong. But this mental noise is not divine truth. It's cognitive distortion, a survival response trying to protect you from the unknown. And this is exactly where faith begins its real work, transforming your brain's need for control into a state of surrender. Judith Beck would call it cognitive restructuring, the moment you challenge the automatic thoughts that say, "Nothing's happening," and replace them with the truth, "Something deeper is forming." This shift rewires your perception, reducing fear while strengthening trust. It's not blind belief, it's neurological faith, the kind that reshapes how your mind and body interpret waiting. In this space, waiting stops being torment and becomes training. Your brain learns endurance, your heart learns rhythm, and your spirit learns how to rest even when life feels unfinished. That's not delay, that's divine conditioning. Because when your mind stops resisting time, your soul starts aligning with it. The unseen construction. There is a moment in every journey where nothing seems to move, yet everything is being built beneath the surface. What looks like inactivity is often invisible construction, the quiet labor of God arranging what your eyes cannot yet perceive. The roots of a tree expand long before the trunk ever breaks the soil. Faith grows the same way. What feels like stagnation is actually structural reinforcement. Imagine the foundation of a skyscraper. The deeper the dig, the longer the silence before you see height. That silence is not delay, it's design. God works like an architect, strengthening the unseen before revealing the visible. When you pray and nothing changes, it doesn't mean nothing's being done. It means the groundwork is being fortified, so the weight of the blessing won't crush you when it arrives. Our minds crave evidence, but divine architecture demands trust. You cannot measure progress in visible metrics when the real miracle is happening underground, inside your habits, your patience, your emotional endurance. Andrew Huberman's research shows that the brain's ability to form new neural pathways is greatest during discomfort, not reward. The same is true spiritually. Transformation happens beneath frustration, not beyond it. So while you stare at the blueprint wondering why the walls haven't risen, God is still in the excavation phase. He's not withholding your future. He's building the structure that can sustain it. The silence is not empty. It's sacred construction. And one day when the foundation finally meets the light, you'll understand why the wait had to be that long. The sacred interruption. Sometimes, the most divine moments arrive disguised as disruption. You plan, you prepare, and just when life seems to move forward, something breaks the rhythm. A sudden delay, an unexpected loss, a closed door that feels personal. In that instant, the mind screams, "Why now?" But from a higher perspective, interruption is not interference, it's intervention. What if the pause you resent is God pulling you off a path that would have quietly drained your spirit? The detours you call obstacles may be divine corrections, moments where heaven interrupts momentum to protect alignment. Our psychology fights it because the human brain equates interruption with danger. It's wired to seek continuity and control. But spiritual growth begins the moment you stop labeling interruptions as mistakes and start recognizing them as messages. Judith Beck teaches that reframing a situation changes the entire emotional outcome. When you reinterpret a disruption as divine redirection, cortisol drops, clarity returns, and peace replaces panic. It's not denial, it's disciplined perception. You're teaching your mind to interpret delay not as disaster, but as design. Every interruption holds a hidden question. Will you trust me even when I change your plans? Because God's timing doesn't always appear in forward motion. Sometimes it's revealed in holy obstruction. The door that closes might not be rejection. It may be mercy. And the silence that follows might not mean absence. It may be preparation for something that needs space to arrive. The sacred interruption is where control ends and faith begins. It's where you stop chasing your plan and start walking with His. The alignment principle. Divine timing isn't about waiting for life to move. It's about life learning how to align. Everything God does flows through the law of synchronization, not speed. When nothing seems to happen, it's often because what's meant for you is still being positioned to meet you. Timing isn't random. It's the mathematics of heaven. Every variable must fit perfectly. People, places, opportunities, and your own inner readiness. You may think you're ready, but alignment means every piece of the equation must speak the same language of purpose. If one factor arrives too early, the entire design collapses. That's why God sometimes withholds what you desire most. Not because He's cruel, but because harmony requires precision. The moment your spirit, circumstance, and destiny vibrate at the same frequency, everything unfolds effortlessly. Andrew Huberman would call this a state of neurosynchrony, where systems operate in perfect coordination. Spiritually, it mirrors the divine mechanism of orchestration. You're not waiting for a blessing to fall from the sky. You're being shaped to resonate with it. And as you evolve, through surrender, through trust, through patience, that alignment quietly forms until suddenly, everything that once resisted you now recognizes you. What once felt like waiting was actually tuning. Like a musician adjusting an instrument before the concert, God is making sure your heart can carry the melody He composed long before you were aware of it. When you're finally in tune with that rhythm, opportunities stop feeling forced and start feeling fated. Because true divine timing isn't about rushing to arrive. It's about being ready when arrival happens, when faith feels like failure. There comes a moment in every believer's life when faith no longer feels noble. It feels broken. You've prayed, trusted, and done everything you thought was right, yet the silence remains. It's in that heavy space that faith begins to feel like failure. The mind starts its quiet rebellion. If I truly believed, wouldn't something have changed by now? But this is the paradox of faith. It often hides within defeat. When everything collapses, what remains is not weakness, but refinement. The illusion that you ever had control starts to die, and something purer takes its place: surrender. Judith Beck would call this cognitive realignment, the process of letting go of distorted conclusions and learning to tolerate uncertainty without self-condemnation. Spiritually, it's the moment where belief evolves from performance into presence. The brain, as Andrew Huberman explains, resists uncertainty because it associates stillness with danger. Yet, in the realm of faith, stillness is not danger, it's development. God's silence is not rejection. It's an invitation to trust without evidence, to stay when your emotions beg you to quit. That is not failure, that is spiritual endurance. Sometimes, faith feels like losing because your old version of trust is being dismantled. You're being stripped of conditional belief, the kind that depends on outcomes, so that what remains is unwavering conviction. The truth is, faith that has never felt like failure has never been tested deeply enough to become real. When you reach that breaking point and whisper, "I can't hold on anymore," God often answers, "Good, now let me." That's the threshold where your faith stops striving and starts breathing. The science of surrender. Surrender is often misunderstood as weakness, when in truth it's one of the highest forms of strength. It's the point where you stop wrestling with time and begin to cooperate with it. From a neurological standpoint, surrender is not passivity. It's physiological recalibration. When you release control, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for overanalyzing and predicting outcomes, begins to quiet. Cortisol drops, breathing deepens, the nervous system returns to balance. What feels like letting go is actually the body entering alignment with peace. Andrew Huberman's research shows that uncertainty triggers the brain's threat response. But when you practice surrender through prayer, breath, reflection, you signal safety back into your system. Spiritually, that's what trust does. It rewires chaos into calm. Judith Beck would say surrender is the moment when you interrupt the thought, "I must fix this," and replace it with, "I can choose peace while this unfolds." In that shift, the weight of time begins to dissolve. You no longer chase outcomes because you've realized peace was never waiting at the finish line. It was available in the pause. God's timing stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like rhythm. Philosophically, Descartes believed that clarity arises when the mind detaches from false certainties. The same applies to surrender. The moment you release your need to control what you cannot, you enter a higher form of awareness, one where trust replaces tension. And that trust doesn't speed up time, but it transforms how you live within it. Because real surrender isn't giving up. It's giving God the space to move where your fear once stood. The mirror of time. Time has a way of reflecting back to us what words can't. When we say we're waiting on God, sometimes He's waiting on us, waiting for awareness, maturity, or stillness to catch up to what He's already planned. Every moment of delay becomes a mirror, showing not divine hesitation, but human resistance. What you call waiting may simply be preparation disguised as pause. When you look closely at the seasons you've labeled as stuck, what patterns repeat themselves? Impatience, fear of being forgotten, the urge to force outcomes. Each of these isn't a punishment, but a revelation. Andrew Huberman teaches that the brain thrives on prediction. It needs to know what comes next. But God's timing dismantles this need, because He's not shaping your schedule. He's shaping your perception. Time reveals your emotional reflexes, the parts of you that still try to rush what should unfold. Judith Beck would call this self-observation without judgment, the practice of stepping outside your thoughts long enough to ask, what is this delay showing me about my relationship with trust? It's not about guilt, it's about awakening. Each day of waiting becomes a lens through which you discover your attachments, your insecurities, and your level of surrender. Descartes said, "To know yourself is the beginning of wisdom." The waiting season is where that wisdom is born. It exposes the gap between what you say you believe and what you actually practice when life slows down. The mirror of time never lies. It reflects the truth you've been avoiding. And once you dare to look without fear, the reflection changes. You stop asking, "Why isn't it happening?" and start realizing, "It's happening within me first." The silence that speaks. There is a language that only silence can translate. It's the voice that doesn't use sound, the guidance that doesn't use words. In the moments when God seems distant, what's truly happening is not abandonment, but conversation, one that requires stillness to be heard. Silence is not God's absence. It's His whisper slowed down to match the rhythm of your heart. When everything grows quiet, the mind panics. It craves feedback, evidence, activity. But silence is the space where faith matures. Andrew Huberman explains that when sensory input decreases, the brain begins to heighten internal awareness, the very condition necessary for intuition and insight. Spiritually, it's the same mechanism through which divine instruction becomes audible. God doesn't compete with noise. He waits for your inner volume to lower enough to recognize His frequency. This silence has texture. It refines, confronts, and heals. It holds a mirror to your motives and invites you to release the need to be constantly reassured. Judith Beck would describe this as emotional regulation, learning to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty without creating catastrophe. The silence is not a test of endurance, but a lesson in spiritual fluency. Can you still feel guided when there are no visible signs? The truth is, God often hides revelation inside quiet moments because only a still heart can handle the weight of truth. If He shouted, we might obey from fear. When He whispers, we respond from love. So when heaven goes quiet, listen closer. The absence of sound may be the sound of alignment. The divine equation. Every event in your life is part of a sacred formula, one that balances free will, divine purpose, and perfect timing. We often perceive this equation through fragments, unable to see the full expression. But God's timing operates like mathematics written in eternity. Every variable, every delay, every intersection exists to preserve balance between what you desire and what you're meant to become. From a philosophical lens, Descartes believed that reason and faith must coexist, that clarity is born when logic and belief merge. The divine equation follows that same logic. God doesn't simply make things happen. He aligns cause and effect across dimensions of time you cannot see. What feels delayed is often an adjustment in the unseen variables that connect your prayer to its fulfillment. The alignment must serve not only your need, but also the lives that your answer will touch. Judith Beck might call this the correction of distorted thinking, the shift from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this synchronizing through me?" The moment you step out of linear thinking, you begin to see that your waiting has ripple effects beyond your comprehension. Andrew Huberman would describe this as pattern recognition, the brain finally realizing that what once felt like chaos was actually coherence unfolding slowly enough for you to perceive it. The divine equation is the bridge between faith and understanding. It's proof that no outcome stands alone. Each delay connects to a greater purpose that protects your future from premature arrival. God is not improvising. He is calculating grace through the precise architecture of time, the moment. Everything aligns. There's a quiet instant, unpredictable, almost unnoticeable, when everything you've been waiting for suddenly fits together. It doesn't arrive with thunder or applause. It arrives like breath after holding it for too long. One moment you're still in the waiting room of life. The next you realize the door has been open the entire time. This is the moment when heaven's equation meets your readiness. You start to see that nothing was random. Every pause, every tear, every closed door has been weaving a precise thread of transformation. The people who left were never punishment. They were preparation. The delays you cursed were divine filters, ensuring that what wasn't meant for your growth fell away. As Andrew Huberman might describe, this is neural integration, the moment when all the fragmented experiences of struggle reorganize into one clear, coherent pattern. Spiritually, it's recognition. Suddenly, God's timing feels not only perfect but merciful. Judith Beck would say your perception finally matches reality. You stop catastrophizing the past and start seeing its architecture. You understand that what once felt like denial was direction. This realization is more than relief. It's peace. Because you no longer need proof. You feel alignment vibrating within you. The mind stops demanding answers, and the heart finally rests. And when that moment arrives, you don't rush to announce it. You breathe it in. You know that the same God who made you wait also made sure the weight of the blessing wouldn't break you. Timing, you realize, was never the enemy. It was the teacher, the eternal clock. There comes a point when you stop measuring God's timing in minutes, months, or milestones. You begin to understand that heaven doesn't own a clock like ours. It operates in eternity, not urgency. Time as we know it is a human construct meant to give structure to chaos. But to God, everything is now. Every past wound, every future prayer, every unfolding moment exists simultaneously in His perfect awareness. What seems late to you is already complete to Him. This is the moment when your soul finally breathes in the truth. Divine timing was never about waiting for something to happen. It was about becoming someone who could hold what was already written. From the Stoics to Descartes, the wisest minds agreed that peace is found not in controlling time, but in harmonizing with it. God's rhythm is eternal. He moves through your delays with the precision of one who knows that no moment is ever wasted. Andrew Huberman might describe this as neural coherence, the state where body, mind, and purpose operate in sync. Spiritually, it's transcendence. You no longer ask, when will it happen? Because you've learned to live in the still point where waiting and fulfillment coexist. Judith Beck would call this cognitive serenity, a mind no longer hijacked by the illusion of control. The eternal clock doesn't tick. It pulses with meaning. It reminds you that every delay was a doorway, every silence was a seed, and every unanswered prayer was an act of divine precision. When you finally see it, you realize the truth you've been chasing all along. God was never late. He was calibrating you to eternity's rhythm, preparing you to walk in step with His timeless design. The truth in the waiting. Somewhere between your first prayer and your last tear, time stopped being your enemy and became your teacher. The silence that once felt unbearable now carries a strange peace, because you've finally seen what was hidden all along. God was never distant. He was designing. Each unanswered prayer was a stroke of precision, not punishment. Every detour was a redirection, not delay. Now you understand why the clock had to pause. You weren't being forgotten, you were being formed. The waiting didn't weaken you. It refined your perception until you could see the divine fingerprints in what once felt like empty space. What you thought was stillness was sacred motion. What you called delay was divine synchronization. When heaven finally moves, it's never late. It's always perfect. You begin to notice that the peace you longed for didn't arrive after the blessing. It arrived when you stopped fighting time. Because peace was never on the other side of answered prayer. It was hidden in the surrender that kept you breathing through the silence. And now, as you stand on the edge of understanding, something quiet yet infinite settles in your chest. You realize you were never waiting for God. He was waiting for you. Waiting for your faith to outgrow fear, your patience to mature into trust, and your heart to recognize that His timing was the answer all along. The truth about God's timing isn't that He's late. It's that He's eternal. And eternity is never in a hurry. It only moves when love is ready to be revealed.